The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shafts of light across Crestwood Avenue, turning the red brick facades of local businesses to burnished copper. A warm breeze carried the scent of fresh lumber and varnish from Bell's custom carpentry, where the shop's large glass front window reflected the fading sky. Inside, Marcus Bell had just wiped sawdust from his brow, his broad shoulders still warmed by the day's labor building bespoke cabinetry. He slipped on his leather apron, its pockets bulging with carving chisels and a tape measure, and stepped outside to retrieve a stacked delivery of oak planks. His heavy work boots crunched against the concrete sidewalk as he rounded the corner of the building. The low hum of traffic on the nearby highway mixed with the distant laughter of children playing in a neighbor's yard. Marcus inhaled the cool, wood-scented air, appreciating the peaceful lull that comes just before evening. He reached the back of his workshop's delivery van when, without warning, two black and white patrol cars roared around the corner, tires squealing in protest against the sudden 180-degree turn. Red and blue lights spun overhead, painting the street in urgent hues. The first cruiser came to a skidding halt inches from Marcus's feet. The second swung to block the road behind him. Doors flew open and officers James Carter and Elena Ramos stormed out, hands hovering near their holstered weapons. Their faces were taut with concentration, eyes scanning his broad frame and the empty van as if they'd spotted a lurking threat. Marcus froze mid-step, his heart pounding in his chest. "What the?" he began, reaching instinctively for the waistband of his apron. Before he could finish, Carter barked, "Get on the ground! Now!" Ramos mirrored the command, her voice sharp and unwavering. The two officers advanced in unison, flashlights bobbing as they trained their beams on his torso. In disbelief, Marcus dropped to his knees, palms splayed on the warm concrete. His breathing quickened. The gentle hum of the street vanished beneath the thud of his heartbeat. He felt the metallic weight of handcuffs clamp around his wrists before he even registered the sting. Carter yanked him to his feet, then forced him against the side of the van, bending him at the waist. The cold hinge of steel bit into his skin as Ramos snapped the second cuff tight. "Hands behind your back," Carter snapped, pressing Marcus's forearms together. Neighbors peered from windows and doorways, shutters rattling in the sudden commotion. The late-day light caught the silver glint of Marcus's shop ID clipped to his belt, an emblem of ownership and pride now rendered meaningless in the officer's eyes. Marcus swallowed hard, fighting the rush of indignation and panic. "Officers," he said, voice steady despite the adrenaline, "I'm the owner of this business. I live above the shop. You've got the wrong man." Carter glanced at Ramos, then back at Marcus with narrowed eyes. "You're going to explain that to dispatch," he replied, voice clipped. Ramos shuffled past, snagging an empty clipboard from the delivery van's floor. As they yanked Marcus toward the cruiser, the afternoon's calm evaporated, replaced by the harsh clang of injustice and the first flickers of a confrontation neither man would soon forget. Marcus barely had time to register Officer Carter's barked command before cold steel closed around his wrists. The handcuffs bit into his skin with a sharp pinch that sent white-hot pain radiating up his forearms. He staggered as Carter yanked him roughly to his feet, pivoting him toward the open rear door of the cruiser. Each breath came shallow and fast, the taste of dust and pine resin lingering on his tongue from the day's work. Ramos hovered nearby, flashlight clenched in one hand, the beam slicing across Marcus's sweat-slicked apron and the scattered oak planks at his feet. Without a word, she snapped shut the second cuff, her fingers clicking the locking mechanism with practiced efficiency. The jolt of metal against metal echoed in Marcus's ears, louder than the wail of the squad car's sirens behind him. His heart thundered as Carter pushed him forward, guiding his cuffed arms up to the roof of the cruiser. The rough paint scraped against his palms, the mounting dread in his chest pressed down like a weight. Neighbors leaned out of windows, their faces etched with alarm. A child's small voice whispered behind a curtain. Marcus's shop ID, his livelihood, the emblem of his years of sacrifice, dangling uselessly at his belt, seemed suddenly powerless. "Hands where I can see 'em," Carter growled, shoving Marcus's head down as he struggled to maintain balance. Marcus's knees buckled against the cruiser's tire. He bit back a grunt, determined not to give them any excuse for further force. He could feel the heat of their suspicion radiating from their uniforms, as though his skin color alone had marked him suspect. Ramos rifled through Carter's notebook, glancing up at the empty van and the silent street. Carter paced around Marcus, pen in hand, jotting something unreadable. The clipboard, once an innocuous tool, now lay discarded on the ground, a mute witness to the unfolding injustice. Each second crawled by, stretching out in a haze of flashing lights and pounding blood. When Carter finally straightened and tore his eyes from his notepad, Marcus dared to look up. Ramos stood behind the cruiser, arms crossed, her face impassive but eyes unflinching. They both exchanged a silent communication, an unspoken realization that no suspicious activity had actually brought them here. Yet the cuffs remained locked, biting into Marcus's skin with every small motion. As Carter motioned to the cruiser's back seat, Marcus forced himself to walk, each step clinking with the rhythm of injustice. He pressed his forehead against the cool metal of the door before sliding inside. The vinyl bench pressed into his shoulders. The city's fading light pooled on the asphalt below. In that cramped, stinging confinement, Marcus's resolve hardened. This was not the end of his story, but the moment he would turn their mistake into the catalyst for change. Marcus Bell sat on the vinyl bench of the cruiser, wrists stinging where the metal cuffs bit into his skin, and his mind drifted back through years of silent indignities. He remembered the first time he felt suspicion trail him. A lazy Saturday afternoon at Jefferson Mall when he was 16. He'd been browsing power tools for a weekend project when a store detective began shadowing his every move, eyes flicking from his broad shoulders to the dark backpack he carried. Each step he took echoed in the empty aisle until the detective finally stepped forward and demanded to search his bag. Marcus had complied, heart pounding, only to have the man shrug and let him go. Nothing found but the message clear. He was guilty until proven innocent. Later, at Crestwood University, he won top marks in every business management course and landed what was supposed to be a prestigious internship at a local construction firm. On his first day, however, the supervisor handed him coffee orders and mailroom duties, insisting that real project work came later. Marcus insisted on his assigned role, but his protest was met with a raised eyebrow and a curt, "Right, we'll get to that." Weeks passed before he was finally entrusted with coordinating supplies, proof that even academic achievement carried a caveat for someone who didn't look the part. After graduation, his resume boasted straight A grades, leadership in the carpentry club, and glowing recommendations. Yet interview after interview ended with polite regrets. "We've chosen another candidate whose background more closely matches our needs." Each rejection felt like a whispered confirmation of unspoken bias. He pored over each letter, sometimes scribbling notes in the margins, before tearing them up to use as scrap paper for shop sketches, transforming frustration into fuel for his workbench. The memory that shone brightest was the day he cut the ribbon on Bell's custom carpentry. Neighbors and family gathered, admiring the polished sign and the gleam of fresh wood. Their congratulations were warm but tinged with surprise, as if a black man succeeding here was an exception to the rule. He recalled his mother's proud tears, mingled with relief that her son finally stood beyond suspicion. Now, in the harsh glow of the patrol car's interior light, Marcus flexed his bruised fingers and straightened his shoulders. The past was a chain he'd forged into strength, and this moment, handcuffed outside his own shop, would become another tool in his arsenal. He would turn their mistake into his catalyst, proving once again that respect and talent cannot be handcuffed. Marcus Bell stood cuffed to the wrought iron fence that bordered his workshop's backlot, the cool metal posts pressing against his shoulder blades as Officers Carter and Ramos squinted at their radios. The early evening light faded to twilight, and the warm glow of the street lamps painted his skin in soft ambers and golds. But there was no comfort in the shifting shadows. Carter keyed his mic. "Dispatch, confirm any suspicious person or stolen vehicle report at Bell's Carpentry." His voice was flat, professional, but Marcus felt the weight of every unspoken accusation in the silence that followed. Ramos circled him slowly, flashlight beams sweeping over his branded work truck, its plate clearly marked Bell Carp, and then over the empty loading dock. She furrowed her brow. By her signal, Carter checked the digital records on his handheld device. The screen's faint glow revealed no calls, no BOLOs, no pending warrants. Marcus kept his jaw steady, his wrists aching from the steel cuffs, but he refused to let anger show. Instead, he forced himself to speak in measured tones. "Officers, might I suggest you check my shop's surveillance feed? My cameras record every entrance and exit." His voice carried the calm authority of a man used to being in control, even when the world seemed determined to wrest it away. Carter glanced at Ramos, then exhaled. With a reluctant nod, he unholstered the radio again. "Dispatch, requesting access to Bell's CARP entry cameras. License plate BELLCARP." While they waited for confirmation, Ramos toyed with the lock on the handcuffs, as if testing whether the steel might finally give. The breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut pine from Marcus's workshop, a reminder of the craft and pride his business embodied. Yet in their eyes it was all irrelevant, just another detail in their web of suspicion. Minutes later, Carter lowered his voice to relay the dispatch. No camera alerts for stolen goods or forced entry. Only routine after-hours footage. Ramos shuffled toward the fence and clicked her keys, releasing Marcus's right cuff, but leaving the left one buckled to iron. He flexed his wrist, savoring the small relief. Carter's shoulders slumped as he pocketed his device. "I apologize for the delay," he muttered, eyes avoiding Marcus's. Ramos offered Marcus back his ID badge and shop key, her expression softened by the truth of the unspooled facts. Marcus peeled the remaining cuff off with a slight wince. As they stepped back, he straightened, smoothing sawdust from his apron and inhaling a steadying breath. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'd be happy to show you inside, to see the real work happening here." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, caught between protocol and the undeniable reality of their mistake, while Marcus unlocked the gate, ready to turn a moment of humiliation into an opportunity for understanding. Marcus Bell unlocked the final handcuff and gently rubbed his wrist as the officers stepped back, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. He straightened his apron, brushed a hand through his hair, and nodded toward the open workshop door. "Please, come inside," he said, voice steady but welcoming. The cool scent of freshly planed wood and the soft drone of power tools greeted them as they crossed the threshold. Overhead, fluorescent lights revealed rows of workbenches, where apprentices hunched over half-finished tables and cabinets, chisels and rasps, moving in precise, confident motions. The officers paused near the entrance, their uniforms suddenly incongruous among the piles of oak boards and stacks of sanded panels. Marcus led them down a central aisle, pausing at a large live-edge dining table. "This piece was designed by my apprentices and me," he explained, running his hand along the silky grain. "Every knot, every curve, we respect the natural story of the wood." He beckoned Officer Ramos closer. She reached out hesitantly, fingertips grazing the surface, and her eyes widened at the smooth warmth under her touch. Nearby, a live camera feed on a mounted monitor showed Marcus teaching a virtual woodworking class. He pointed out the subtle angle of a dovetail joint, his tone patient and encouraging. Carter watched, arms uncrossed, as Marcus guided a young student through the motion of a handplane. Inspired, Marcus walked to a nearby tool rack, selected the very plane he'd used that morning, and polished its sole on his apron. Then, with a warm smile, he handed it to Carter. "Here," he said. "Try it yourself." Carter took the plane, still in awe, and positioned it on a small oak block. He pushed forward, shaving off a thin, curling ribbon of wood that danced across the bench. His jaw slackened in surprise and respect. As Carter looked up, plane in hand, Ramos set aside her notepad, her expression transformed from skepticism to admiration. Marcus watched them both, shoulders relaxed. In that sunlit workshop, the tools, once symbols of his craft, became instruments of reconciliation. The afternoon's tension dissolved, replaced by the hum of shared purpose. Through skilled hands and open hearts, a new understanding was being built, one smooth shave of wood at a time. The workshop fell silent as the last curl of oak shavings drifted to the floor. Under the harsh glare of the fluorescent lamps, Marcus Bell stood behind his workbench, arms folded, watching officers Carter and Ramos lean against the rafters of his shop. The air still smelled of fresh pine and linseed oil, but now there was an undercurrent of tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Carter ran a hand through his hair, his uniform suddenly feeling too tight. He swallowed against the lump in his throat, haunted by the image of Marcus in steel cuffs. For the first time, he truly saw the quiet dignity in the man whose hands crafted beauty from rough logs. His chest tightened as memories of that impulsive takedown replayed in his mind, each second of injustice echoing louder than the drills humming in the corner. Clearing his throat, Carter took a hesitant step forward. "Mr. Bell," his voice wavered, "I owe you an apology." He paused, as if unsure how to let the words escape. "I acted on assumptions about you, your business, even your right to stand here. I let my bias strip you of your dignity, and I'm deeply sorry." His eyes glistened, and the badge on his chest felt heavier than ever. Ramos shifted, boots creaking on the wood floor. She met Marcus's calm gaze and spoke softly. "We were wrong. We saw a black man out of place and jumped to conclusions. I apologize for the way we treated you." Slowly, she unclipped her badge and laid it gently atop the polished workbench, the silver sheriff's star catching the overhead light like a dropped promise. Carter mirrored her action, unbuckling his own badge and placing it beside hers. The two stars lay nestled among chisels and planes, symbols of authority humbled before tools of creation. The badges seemed fragile here, vulnerable on the grain of the wood that had meant so much to Marcus's life's work. Marcus stepped around the bench, his own hands unclenched. He picked up Carter's badge, rubbing its cool metal between thumb and forefinger. "I accept your apology," he said, voice steady but warm. "And I'd like you both to join me next weekend at my community carpentry class. Come learn the craft that builds more than furniture. It builds understanding." Carter and Ramos exchanged a glance, relief softening their features. In that moment, the hum of the workshop felt gentle again. As the badges lay side by side on the bench, the officers understood that respect could not be handcuffed, and that a single gesture of accountability could begin to stitch together the rift their assumptions had torn. 1 week later, the late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Bell's custom carpentry school, illuminating fine dust motes, dancing above rows of workbenches. Marcus Bell stood at the head of the classroom, formerly his workshop, and surveyed the dozen students before him. Elderly neighbors brushing up on woodworking, a few at-risk teens nervously clutching chisels, and at the back, officers James Carter and Elena Ramos in plain clothes, aprons tied around their waists. The air smelled of fresh oak shavings and linseed oil, the comforting scent of possibility. Marcus began the session by demonstrating the proper stance for planing. Feet shoulder-width apart, the plane held firmly yet with relaxed wrists. He pushed the tool forward in a long, even stroke, producing a single silky curl of wood that coiled on the bench like a ribbon. The students watched, rapt, as the surface of the plank transformed from rough and dull to gleaming and smooth. Carter stepped forward first, hesitating as he placed his hands over the plane's handles. Under Marcus's calm guidance, "Let it glide. Don't force it." Carter found a rhythm, sending a whisper-thin shaving onto the bench. His eyes widened in surprise, a smile breaking through his usually stern expression. Across the room, Ramos guided a shy teenager named Deshawn through dovetailed joint layout. She traced precise pencil lines on the maple board, her voice steady. "Measure twice, cut once. Always respect the material." Deshawn's first chisel stroke splintered the edge of the board, and his head dropped in frustration. Ramos knelt beside him, steadying his elbow. "Mistakes are part of the craft," she reassured him. "Each one teaches you something about patience." Together, they remapped the joint, and when Deshawn's second attempt produced tight, clean interlocking pins, he looked up at Ramos, beaming. As the golden hour approached, Marcus invited everyone to share what they'd made. A retired schoolteacher held up a small oak shelf she'd assembled, its corners square and edges sanded to softness. A father-daughter pair displayed a handcrafted picture frame, the girls' painted initials nestled in the wood's grain. When Carter set his finished stool on the floor, its turned legs perfectly balanced. The room erupted in gentle applause. He ran a hand along the polished surface and looked at Marcus with newfound respect. I never imagined I'd feel this proud of something I built, he admitted, voice hushed. Marcus gathered the group in a loose circle around the benches. Woodworking isn't just about craft, he said. It's about community. We shape the wood, but it also shapes us, teaching patience, respect, and the value of each other's hands. The students nodded, the earlier tension between police and public washed away by shared accomplishment. Outside, the streetlight turned on, its soft glow a promise of safety, born not from authority alone, but from cooperation. That evening, as the last sawdust was swept from the floor and tools returned to their racks, Marcus lingered by the door. Carter and Ramos approached, each holding a small wooden token they'd carved themselves. Carter's a thin rectangle etched with a simple heart, Ramos's a smooth circle etched with a star. They pressed them into Marcus's open palm. "Thank you," Ramos said. Carter nodded. "For teaching us how to listen." In the quiet afterglow, the three stood together, carpenter and officers, knowing they'd not only built furniture, but also bridges that would endure long after the wood had settled.